The stars have always been patient teachers. They do not rush, they do not beg to be understood. They simply burn, century after century, millennium after millennium, waiting for someone wise enough to look up and truly see them. I have watched those stars for 11,000 years. I have seen empires rise beneath their light and crumble to dust while they continued their silent vigil. I have witnessed species achieve transcendence and others fade into extinction, their names forgotten by a universe that does not mourn. And in all that time, across all those countless worlds and civilizations, I never once imagined that I would find myself here, aboard a human station, clutching a cold cup of their bitter stimulant drink, waiting to discover if my species would survive the night.
My name is Valith Sorendis. I was a senior arbiter of the collective ascendancy, a position that once commanded respect across 7 galactic arms. Now I am a refugee, a supplicant, a representative of a dying people who have come to beg salvation from a species we once dismissed as little more than clever animals playing with fire.
The irony is not lost on me.
The human station orbiting their world called Europa is not beautiful. I remember the first time I saw it through the viewport of our diplomatic vessel, and I felt something close to disappointment. The great halls of Ascendancy Prime gleam with crystalline spires that catch the light of 3 suns and refract it into symphonies of color. Our stations are works of art, testaments to the aesthetic superiority of a civilization that has mastered the fundamental forces of reality itself.
This human structure was gray, functional. Segments of it appeared to be constructed from different eras entirely, welded together with no apparent concern for visual harmony. Cables ran along external corridors like exposed veins. Docking bays looked like they had been designed by engineers who cared only whether they worked, not whether they pleased the eye. I almost turned back. Fleet Admiral Toros would have wanted me to. He had opposed this mission from the beginning, arguing that seeking human assistance was beneath the dignity of the Ascendancy. Better to die with our pride intact, he said, than to grovel before primitives. But Toros was dead now, along with the 17 billion souls of the Vareth cluster, and pride seemed like a poor comfort against annihilation. The human who greeted me at the docking bay was a woman named Commander Sarah Chen. She was small by the standards of her species, though still taller than me. We Serenthi are not an imposing people physically. Her hair was dark, pulled back in a simple arrangement, and her uniform was as unremarkable as her station. Gray fabric, simple insignia, nothing to suggest rank or accomplishment beyond a few small pins I did not understand. She smiled when she saw me, and the expression seemed genuine. "Arbiter Valith," she said, extending her hand in their peculiar greeting gesture. "Welcome to Europa Station. I hope your journey wasn't too difficult." I stared at her hand for a moment, remembering the briefings I had reviewed about human customs. Then I reached out and clasped it, feeling the warmth of her skin against my cooler flesh. Her grip was firm, but not aggressive. "The journey was adequate," I replied, "though I confess the circumstances that necessitated it were not." Something flickered in her eyes. Understanding, perhaps, or pity. I found myself hoping it was not pity. "No," she said quietly. "I don't imagine they were. Please, follow me. We've prepared quarters for you, and the Council has asked me to inform you that they can meet whenever you're ready."
I am ready now.
She paused, steadying my face. I do not know what she saw there. Exhaustion, certainly. I had not slept properly in 9 standard cycles. Fear, probably.
I was not skilled at hiding my emotions the way some Serenthi diplomats were, but whatever she perceived, she simply nodded.
Then I'll take you there directly. We walked through the station's corridors, and I observed everything with the meticulous attention of a species facing extinction. The humans we passed were busy, but not frantic. They moved with purpose, carrying data tablets, speaking in low voices, occasionally nodding or offering brief smiles to Commander Chen as we passed. None of them stared at me with open curiosity, though I was certain many had never seen a Serenthi in person. It was as if my presence was unremarkable, expected even. The walls bore signs in their language, directions to various sections of the station: medical, engineering, recreation, hydroponic bay 7. Everything labeled, everything organized for efficiency rather than aesthetics. I noticed that several of the ceiling panels were slightly misaligned, and one flickered with an inconsistent light that no ascendancy engineer would have tolerated for more than a moment. "Your station is quite functional," I said, not meaning it as the insult it probably sounded like. Commander Chen laughed softly. "It's held together with duct tape and stubbornness, you mean? Europa Station was never meant to be a diplomatic hub. It was a research outpost for studying the ocean beneath the ice, but we've learned to work with what we have." "Do you not build new stations when the old ones become insufficient?" "Sometimes, but there's something to be said for keeping things that still work. They teach you things, remind you where you came from." She glanced at me. "How long has your species had faster-than-light travel, Arbiter?" The question caught me off guard. "Approximately 11,000 of your years." "And how long have you had this station?" I am not certain. The Vareth Research Station was constructed perhaps 2 centuries ago, though it has been modernized several—" I stopped. "The Vareth Research Station no longer exists. It was in the Vareth cluster." Commander Chen was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was soft. "I'm sorry. I did not know how to respond to that. 17 billion souls, a cluster of stars that had been home to some of our greatest minds, our most beautiful art, our oldest libraries, gone, reduced to expanding clouds of debris by the hierarchy's extinction weapons. And this human woman, this representative of a species we had barely acknowledged existed until 20 of their years ago, was offering condolences as if she understood. "The council is through here," she said, gesturing to a door that looked no different from any other we had passed. The room beyond was larger than I expected, though still modest by ascendancy standards. A circular table dominated the center, surrounded by simple chairs. Windows along one wall provided a view of Jupiter's massive form, its storms churning in eternal patterns of rust and cream. 6 humans sat at the table, and they rose as I entered. I recognized some of them from the intelligence briefings I had studied. Admiral James Okonkwo, the highest-ranking military officer in the United Human Alliance. Director Lin Xiaoming, head of their Scientific Research Division. President Catherine Reyes, the elected leader of their largest political faction. Others I did not know, but their postures and positions suggested authority. None of them were smiling now. "Arbiter Valeth," President Reyes said, her voice calm and measured. "Please, sit. We've been expecting you." I lowered myself into the offered chair, conscious of how small I must look surrounded by these tall beings. "You have been expecting me?" "We've been watching the war," Admiral Okonkwo said. His voice was deep, resonant. His dark skin seemed to absorb the room's light rather than reflect it, and his eyes held a stillness that I found unsettling. "We've been watching for some time now." "Then you know why I am here." "We have our suspicions, But we'd like to hear it from you. Director Lin leaned forward slightly. In your own words, Arbiter, what's happening out there? I had rehearsed this moment 100 times during the journey. I had prepared speeches, carefully constructed appeals designed to convey the urgency of our situation while maintaining the dignity of the ascendancy. But sitting there, looking into the eyes of these patient humans, all my prepared words dissolved.
We are dying, I said simply. The collective ascendancy, which has stood for 11 millennia, which has shepherded this region of the galaxy through countless crises, is being systematically exterminated. The hierarchy of the endless dark has declared total war against all organic life, and we are losing. No one spoke. They simply watched me, waiting.
3 years ago, the first hierarchy fleets emerged from the void reaches. We assumed they were merely another aggressive species, easily contained. We had faced such threats before. We deployed the 7th Armada, 40,000 vessels, the pride of our military. They were destroyed in 17 hours. Not defeated, destroyed. Every ship, every crew member, 200 million soldiers gone in less than a single rotation of your world. I watched for reactions, but the humans remained still. Their expressions were attentive, but unreadable. Since then, we have lost 39 major engagements. We have lost 11 core worlds, including Vareth Prime and its entire cluster. We have lost approximately 112 billion citizens. My voice wavered. The hierarchy does not negotiate. They do not take prisoners. They do not occupy conquered territory. They simply erase. Every world they capture is reduced to sterile rock. Every population is exterminated to the last individual. They are not waging a war of conquest.
They are waging a war of extinction.
President Reyes' expression shifted slightly. And the other powers? The Merchant Collective? The Threll Dominion? The Threll Dominion fell 7 months ago. The last of their hive queens was killed at the Battle of Crystalline Deep. The Merchant Collective surrendered 9 weeks ago, believing they could negotiate. The hierarchy accepted their surrender, then systematically destroyed every world in their territory over the following 6 days. I paused, letting the weight of those words settle. The ascendancy is the last major power still resisting, and we cannot hold for more than another year, perhaps less.
Admiral Okonkwo spoke, his voice still calm. And you've come to us. Why?
The question should have been straightforward. We needed allies. We needed ships, soldiers, weapons. We needed anything that might delay the inevitable. But I knew that was not truly what he was asking.
Because you are the only species in this region that the hierarchy has not attacked, I said. Because despite your youth, you have demonstrated certain capabilities that have drawn our attention, and because we have nowhere else to turn.
You mean because you've exhausted all other options, Director Lin said, not unkindly.
Yes. And what exactly do you want from us?
I took a breath. Military assistance. Ships, if you have them to spare. Technology, if you are willing to share. Strategic coordination at minimum. And I hesitated. Shelter. For our civilians, for our children. If the ascendancy falls, we would ask that you take in as many of our people as you can. Let some fragment of our civilization survive.
The room was silent for a long moment. Then President Reyes spoke.
23 years ago, when your ascendancy first made contact with humanity, your ambassador addressed our United Nations. Do you know what he said? I did not know. I had not been involved in those early negotiations.
He said that humanity was a species of marginal interest. He said that our solar system was strategically irrelevant and that our technological development was centuries behind the baseline for meaningful galactic participation. He said that the ascendancy would monitor our progress, but saw no value in formal relations. I felt heat rise to my face. I was not aware of the precise wording. He also said, Admiral Okonkwo continued, that if we attempted to expand beyond our solar system without ascendancy permission, we would be contained for the stability of the galactic order. His exact words. Our policies regarding emerging species were condescending, Director Lin offered, dismissive, perhaps a bit arrogant. I had no response. Everything they said was true. President Reyes leaned forward. Arbiter Valeth, I'm not telling you this to be cruel. I'm telling you because I want you to understand our perspective. For 23 years, the collective ascendancy has treated humanity as an irrelevance. You've refused to share technology, you've declined to establish trade, you've rejected every diplomatic overture we've made. And now you come to us, in your hour of desperation, asking for our help. Yes, I whispered, we do. Why should we give it? The question hung in the air. I searched for an answer, some argument, some appeal to shared values or mutual benefit. But I found nothing. We had given humanity no reason to care about our survival. We had dismissed them, patronized them, kept them at arm's length. And now we were asking them to sacrifice their own security for a civilization that had treated them as insignificant. I don't know, I admitted. I have no argument that would justify your assistance, only a plea. We are dying, and I am asking you to help us because there is no one else to ask. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Commander Chen, who had remained standing near the door, cleared her throat softly. May I, Madam President? Reyes nodded. Commander Chen stepped forward. Arbiter Valeth, may I ask you a personal question? You may. When you looked at our station through your viewport, when you saw the gray walls and the misaligned panels and the cables running along the corridors, what did you think? I blinked. I thought it was primitive, unimpressive. I wondered how a species that built such things could possibly be of any use against the hierarchy. Commander Chen smiled slightly. That's honest. I appreciate that. She paused. Let me tell you something about this station, Arbiter. Europa Station was built by hand, piece by piece, over the course of 60 years. The first module was constructed by engineers who knew they would never live to see it completed. They built it anyway. They welded steel in the vacuum of space, breathing recycled air, eating processed algae, knowing that if anything went wrong, they were too far from Earth for anyone to save them. They built it because it needed to be built, because that's what humans do. She gestured toward the window, toward Jupiter's swirling storms. Out there, beneath 100 kilometers of ice, there's an ocean. Dark, cold, crushing pressure that would destroy any unprotected vessel in seconds. And we built submarines to explore it. We sent people into that darkness not because it was easy, but because we had to know what was there, because that's who we are. I do not understand what this has to do with... Humanity is young, Commander Chen continued. We've only had fire for a few 100,000 years, writing for a few thousand, spaceflight for less than 3 centuries. By your standards, we're infants. But we've spent every moment of that time fighting.
fighting the cold, fighting the dark, fighting disease and famine and each other. We've clawed our way up from caves to the stars, and we've done it by refusing to die when everything told us we should." She looked at me directly, and I saw something in her eyes that I had not noticed before. A depth, a hardness. "You asked why we should help you. Here's my question. Do you actually want our help? Or do you just want our resources while you continue to look down on us?" I opened my mouth to respond, then closed it. The question cut deeper than I expected. I began. "I do not know. I was sent here because the High Council believed you might possess weapons or technology that could assist us. They did not speak of you as equals. They spoke of you as a resource to be utilized." "And what do you believe?" I thought about the question. I thought about the station I had walked through, the humans I had passed, the calm competence with which they went about their work. I thought about Commander Chen's words, about engineers building something they would never live to see completed. "I believe," I said slowly, "that I have misjudged you, that my people have misjudged you. I do not know what you are capable of, Commander, but I am beginning to suspect it is more than we imagined."
Commander Chen nodded, then looked to President Reyes.
The president was silent for a moment, exchanging glances with the others at the table. Then she spoke. "Arbiter Vaylith, we are going to need some time to discuss this among ourselves. In the meantime, Commander Chen will show you to your quarters. Rest if you can. We'll have an answer for you by tomorrow." I wanted to protest. Tomorrow might be too late. Every hour we delayed was another hour the hierarchy had to continue their advance. But I recognized the dismissal for what it was, and I did not have the leverage to argue.
"Thank you," I said. "I await your decision."
The quarters they gave me were small but comfortable. A bed sized for human proportions, which meant it was slightly too large for me. A desk, a window looking out at the stars. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at those distant points of light, thinking about everything I had seen and heard. Commander Chen had left me with a communication device, telling me to call if I needed anything. She had also left a data tablet containing what she called light reading, historical documents about humanity that she thought might help me understand them better. I picked up the tablet and began to scroll. The first document was a speech from something called World War II, given by a human leader named Winston Churchill. "We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender." The second was a record of something called the Apollo 13 mission, in which a spacecraft suffered a catastrophic failure on its way to their moon. Instead of dying, the crew improvised repairs using materials on hand and returned safely to Earth. The document included audio recordings of their calm communications with ground control as they worked to save themselves. The third was a collection of letters written by soldiers during something called the Battle of Stalingrad, where humans had fought each other in the ruins of a frozen city for months, surviving on scraps, refusing to retreat even when all logic said they should. I read for hours. I read about the siege of Leningrad, where an entire city was cut off and starving for nearly 3 years, and still they did not surrender. I read about the Donner Party, a group of travelers trapped in the mountains by snow who resorted to consuming their dead rather than give up. I read about Shackleton's expedition, where a ship was crushed by ice in the Antarctic and its crew survived for over a year in conditions that should have killed them all. Story after story of impossible survival, of humans who were told they could not win, could not survive, could not endure, and who refused to listen.
I began to understand why Commander Chen had given me this reading.
At some point, I must have fallen asleep. When I woke, the stars outside my window had shifted, and there was a soft chime at my door.
"Enter," I said.
Commander Chen stepped inside. Her expression was unreadable.
"The council has reached a decision," she said. "They'd like to see you." I rose quickly, trying to compose myself. "What have they decided?"
"It's better if they tell you themselves."
The walk back to the council chamber felt longer than before. I tried to read Commander Chen's body language for any indication of what awaited me, but she gave nothing away. Her stride was steady, her posture relaxed. If anything, she seemed almost amused by something. The same 6 humans were seated at the table when we arrived. This time, they did not rise. President Reyes gestured to a chair, and I sat.
"Arbiter Valith," she said, "we've spent the last 12 hours in intense discussion. We've consulted with our military strategists, our scientists, and representatives from every major nation on Earth and every colony in our system. What I'm about to tell you represents the unanimous consensus of the United Human Alliance."
I braced myself for rejection. "We will help you." For a moment, I was not certain I had heard correctly. "You will?" "We will, but not in the way you expect." Admiral Okonkwo spoke. "You came here looking for ships to supplement your fleets, technology to enhance your weapons, perhaps some auxiliary forces to support your strategies. You expected us to play a minor role in your war, to be a small piece of your larger effort." "That is accurate," I admitted.
"That's not what's going to happen."
Director Lin touched something on the table, and a holographic display appeared above us. I recognized it as a star map, the local galactic region. The Ascendancy's remaining territory was highlighted in blue, a shrinking island surrounded by red. The red was the hierarchy's advance, and it covered nearly half the visible space. "Current situation," Director Lin said. "Your forces are retreating on all fronts. Your industrial base has been reduced by approximately 70%. Your remaining fleets are fragmented and operating independently due to the loss of central command infrastructure. At current rates of attrition, total collapse will occur within 8 to 14 months. I flinched at hearing our doom described so clinically. "The hierarchy's forces number approximately 200 million vessels of various classes, supported by automated production facilities that can replace losses faster than any organic civilization can destroy them. Their command structure is centralized but distributed, making decapitation strikes ineffective. Their weapons technology is approximately equivalent to your own, but their numerical superiority makes conventional warfare unwinnable." "You have been studying the war closely," I observed. "We've been studying everything closely." Director Lin's expression remained neutral. "The question isn't whether the Ascendancy can win. It can't, not alone, not with current strategies. The question is whether the war can be won at all." "And your conclusion?"
Admiral Okonkwo leaned forward. "Our conclusion is that it can, but it requires abandoning everything your people believe about warfare."
The holographic display shifted, zooming in on a region of space I did not recognize. "This is the hierarchy's primary production center," the Admiral continued.
It's located in what you call the void reaches, approximately 4,000 light-years from the current front lines. Your intelligence services have known about it for over a year, but you've classified it as an impossible target, too distant, too well defended. Any fleet large enough to threaten it would be detected and destroyed long before arrival.
That assessment is correct, I said. The void reaches are the heart of hierarchy space. No organic vessel has ever returned from that region.
Your vessels haven't, because you've been trying to fight a conventional war against an enemy that doesn't play by conventional rules.
President Reyes stood, walking toward the window. She stood with her back to us, looking out at the stars. Orbiter, when humans fight, we don't always fight fair. We don't always fight the way our enemies expect. We've spent our entire history as a species learning how to win against opponents who should have beaten us. Larger armies, superior technology, impossible odds. And we've learned that the key to victory isn't always strength, it's adaptability, creativity, and the willingness to do whatever is necessary.
She turned to face me.
The collective ascendancy has been fighting this war like a civilization that's never truly faced extinction. You've been trying to hold territory, preserve infrastructure, minimize losses. All reasonable strategies, if your goal is to survive with your society intact. But that's not an option anymore. Your society is already dying. The only question now is whether something survives at all.
What are you proposing?
Total mobilization, Admiral Okonkwo said. Not just military. Everything, every ship, every factory, every person capable of contributing. You stop defending territory and start fighting a war of attrition that the hierarchy isn't prepared for. And humanity? Humanity does the same. We commit everything we have to this fight, not as your auxiliaries, as your partners. Full integration of command structures, full sharing of technology, full commitment of resources. I stared at them. You cannot be serious. Your species has barely colonized your own system. You have what? A few hundred ships? A few billion people? The hierarchy has destroyed civilizations 1,000 times your size.
9,412 ships, Director Lin said calmly, as of this morning, with another 6,000 currently under construction, and 18 billion people distributed across Earth, Mars, the Belt, and the outer colonies.
I felt my mouth open slightly. That is not possible. Your species achieved spaceflight less than 3 centuries ago. You cannot have.
We built them, Commander Chen said quietly, over the last 20 years. Ever since your ambassador told us we were irrelevant and would be contained if we tried to expand. We smiled, nodded, and went back to work, in secret, without anyone noticing.
The holographic display changed again. I saw shipyards, hidden in asteroids, buried beneath moons, floating in the darkness between stars. Thousands of vessels in various stages of completion. Factories producing weapons I did not recognize. Training facilities where millions of humans drilled in combat tactics.
You've been preparing, I whispered.
We've been preparing since the day we realized we were not alone in the universe, President Reyes said, hoping we would never have to use what we built, but preparing nonetheless.
Why? How could you have known?
We didn't know about the hierarchy specifically, but we knew that a universe filled with civilizations older and more powerful than ourselves was unlikely to be entirely benevolent. We knew that someone, someday, would come for us, so we got ready.
Admiral Okonkwo stood
and for the first time I saw him smile. It was not a warm expression. Arbiter Valeth, your people thought we were bluffing when we said we would defend ourselves. They thought we were primitives, playing at civilization, making empty threats we could never back up. They dismissed us. They ignored us. They never bothered to look closely enough to see what we were really doing.
He walked toward me, and despite his calm demeanor, I felt a sudden urge to step back. The hierarchy made the same mistake. They saw a small species in a quiet corner of the galaxy and decided we weren't worth their attention. They focused on your ascendancy, on the Threll, on the merchant collective, on the obvious threats. They never considered that the real danger might be the quiet ones, the ones who watch, the ones who wait, the ones who build. "You cannot defeat the hierarchy," I said, but even as the words left my mouth, I was no longer certain they were true. They have 200 million ships. They control half the galaxy. They have destroyed every civilization that opposed them.
They've never fought humans.
The simple confidence in those words sent a chill through me.
Arbiter, President Reyes said, we're not offering to help you win your war. We're offering to take over your war, to fight it our way, with our strategies, under our command. If you accept, you'll need to trust us completely, and that's not something your people are used to doing.
And if we refuse? Then you die, and eventually the hierarchy comes for us anyway, but later rather than sooner, which gives us more time to prepare. I looked around the room at these strange, calm beings who had somehow hidden an armada from the entire galaxy. I thought about the stories I had read the night before, the tales of impossible survival, of humans who refused to die when everything said they should. I thought about Commander Chen's words, about engineers building something they would never live to see.
"What do you need from us?" I asked.
The next 3 months were the strangest of my life.
The Ascendancy's remaining leadership resisted at first, of course. Fleet Admiral Serenthus, who had assumed command after Toros' death, was outraged by the suggestion that we cede strategic authority to a species we had barely acknowledged as sentient. There were heated debates, shouted accusations, thinly veiled threats. Several councillors advocated executing me for even presenting the human proposal.
But the hierarchy did not pause for our politics. 3 more worlds fell while we argued. Another 8 billion lives extinguished. And slowly, painfully, the reality of our situation forced even the most prideful among us to accept the truth.
We had no other choice. The integration began immediately. Human officers arrived at our remaining fleet bases. Polite but insistent, carrying data tablets filled with new tactical doctrines and strategic plans. They did not give orders, not at first. They asked questions, endless questions. Why did we position our ships in those formations? What were the assumptions behind our defensive strategies? How did our supply chains function? Where were the bottlenecks, the inefficiencies, the redundancies? At first, our officers found the questions insulting. How dare these primitives question 11,000 years of military tradition? But the humans were patient. They listened. They took notes. And then they started making suggestions. Small changes at first, minor adjustments to patrol routes that reduced fuel consumption by 3%, modifications to communication protocols that cut response times by half, tweaks to maintenance schedules that increased ship readiness by significant margins. None of it was revolutionary. All of it was obvious in hindsight, and yet somehow, in 11,000 years, we had never thought to try it. You've been doing things a certain way for so long that you've stopped asking if it's the best way, Commander Chen explained to me one evening. We had developed something like a friendship over the weeks, or at least a mutual respect. That's the danger of success. It makes you complacent.
And humans are never complacent?
Humans are constantly afraid that whatever we've built is about to collapse. We don't trust our institutions to last. We don't trust our technologies to keep working. We don't trust the universe to be kind. So we keep looking for ways to improve, to adapt, to prepare for the worst.
That sounds exhausting.
It is, but it's also why we're still here.
The human ships arrived 6 weeks after the alliance was formalized. They came in waves, emerging from fold space in formations that our sensors initially failed to recognize as military. Their vessels were ugly by ascendancy standards, blocky, utilitarian, lacking any of the graceful curves we favored. Some appeared to be converted cargo haulers. Others looked like they had been assembled from salvaged parts.
But there were so many of them. Fleet after fleet after fleet. 10,000, 15,000, 20,000 that kept coming, filling the void around our remaining starbases until the darkness itself seemed to bristle with angular silhouettes. Admiral Okonkwo took personal command of the combined fleet. His flagship, the UHS Resolute, was smaller than our dreadnoughts, but equipped with systems we didn't understand. Human engineers worked alongside our own, installing devices they called force multipliers, without explaining what they multiplied or how. I asked Commander Chen about the weapons once. She showed me a simulation. The devices were called void lances, weapons designed not to destroy ships directly, but to tear holes in the fabric of space itself. In the simulation, a single void lance could rip a wound in reality that would swallow an entire fleet if positioned correctly. The energies involved were staggering, the calculations required nearly impossible. How did you develop this? I asked, struggling to understand what I was seeing.
We studied your technology, the stuff you refused to share with us. She smiled slightly. Did you really think we weren't paying attention during those diplomatic meetings? That we weren't analyzing every scan, every reading, every scrap of data we could collect? You showed us what was possible. We figured out how to make it work.
You reverse-engineered technology you had never been given.
And improved it significantly. I stared at the simulation, watching a simulated hierarchy fleet vanish into a void rift, and I felt something I had not experienced in a very long time. Hope. The Battle of Varenthus began on the 147th day of the Alliance.
Varenthus was a fortress world, one of the last significant military installations we still held. The hierarchy had sent a fleet of 9 million vessels to take it, the largest single force they had deployed since the war began. Our intelligence suggested they intended to use Varenthus as a staging point for the final assault on Ascendancy Prime itself.
We had 43,000 Ascendancy ships at Varenthus. The humans had deployed an additional 57,000. 100,000 vessels against 9 million. By any rational calculation, it was suicide. I watched the battle from a command station aboard Admiral Okonkwo's flagship. The human admiral stood at the center of the holographic display, hands clasped behind his back, watching the hierarchy fleet approach with an expression of perfect calm. "They're not slowing," one of his officers reported. "Standard approach vector. They're expecting us to retreat."
"They always expect retreat," Okonkwo said. "It's what civilized species do when faced with overwhelming force. They calculate the odds, recognize the impossibility, and withdraw to fight another day." He paused. Signal all ships. Execute Pattern Omega.
I did not know what Pattern Omega was. I was about to ask when the human fleet began to move.
They did not charge the hierarchy formation. They did not form defensive lines. Instead, they scattered, breaking into thousands of small groups that spread across the entire battle space like seeds thrown into the wind.
What are they doing? I asked Commander Chen, who stood nearby.
Making themselves hard to kill.
The hierarchy fleet opened fire, their weapons creating a wall of destruction that should have annihilated anything in its path. But the human ships danced through the barrage like insects through rain, their movements impossibly precise, their coordination perfect. Ships that should have been destroyed evaded by meters, slipping through gaps in the fire pattern that seemed to open just as they arrived.
Predictive evasion algorithms, Commander Chen explained. Every hierarchy ship's firing pattern is analyzed in real time by our network. We know where their shots are going before they're fired. We just make sure we're not there when they arrive.
That's not possible. It wasn't until about 6 months ago. One of our engineers figured it out while watching birds flock. Swarm intelligence. Each ship acts as a node in a distributed processing network. Together, they think faster than any individual computer could.
The human ships continued their impossible dance, and then they began to fire back.
I expected their weapons to be weak, the output of a young civilization trying to punch above its weight. But the void lances I had seen in simulation were far more terrible in reality. Each shot tore a wound in space, and hierarchy ships caught in the rifts simply ceased to exist, not destroyed, erased, pulled into some other dimension or state of being that our science had no name for.
Thousands of hierarchy vessels vanished in the first exchange, then tens of thousands.
The hierarchy began to adapt, spreading their formation to minimize void lance effectiveness. But the humans adapted faster, shifting from void lances to more conventional kinetic weapons that filled the space between with clouds of accelerated projectiles. When the hierarchy concentrated to weather the kinetics, the void lances opened up again. It was like watching a master composer conduct a symphony of destruction.
How? I whispered. How is this possible? Admiral Okonkwo heard me. He did not turn, but he answered. Human history, Arbiter. We spent thousands of years fighting each other. Every strategy you can imagine we've tried, every tactic we've refined, every weapon we've developed and countered and developed again. War is not something we do, it's something we are. It's woven into our DNA, beaten into our culture, burned into our collective memory. We hate it, we fear it, and we are very, very good at it.
The battle lasted for 17 hours. By the end, the hierarchy fleet had been reduced to scattered remnants, fleeing into fold space to escape the slaughter. We lost 11,000 ships, a terrible toll, but a fraction of what we had expected.
The hierarchy had lost nearly 5 million.
Word of the victory spread through the remaining ascendancy worlds like fire through dry grass. For the first time in 3 years, people dared to hope. For the first time since the war began, we had won.
But the humans did not celebrate. They worked. While our crews rested and our politicians gave speeches about the turn of the tide, human engineers were already aboard captured hierarchy vessels, stripping them for technology and information. Human analysts were reviewing battle data, identifying weaknesses in hierarchy tactics, developing new countermeasures. Human factories were producing more ships, more weapons, more void lances.
"Why don't you rest?" I asked Commander Chen on the 3rd day after the battle. You've earned it."
She looked at me with exhausted eyes. "We rest when it's over, not before."
"But you won."
"We won a battle. We haven't won the war. The hierarchy still has 190 million ships. They still have their production centers. They're still out there, regrouping, adapting, preparing. If we stop now, we lose."
"Surely you can afford a brief respite."
"No," her voice was firm. "We can't. This is what the hierarchy doesn't understand about us, Arbiter. They think war is about resources and production and numerical superiority. They think they can wait us out, wear us down, exhaust us. But they're wrong. Humans don't get tired of surviving. We don't get bored of fighting for our lives. We don't give up because the odds are bad or the cost is high. We keep going. We keep pushing.
We keep fighting until there's nothing left to fight, or until we've won." She turned back to her work.
That's what they never understood. That's what they thought was a bluff. But it wasn't. It was a promise. The next 6 months saw the war transform completely. The humans did not fight like the Ascendancy had fought. They did not defend territory or protect infrastructure. They attacked, everywhere, simultaneously, without pause. Small squadrons struck deep into hierarchy space, destroying supply lines and production facilities. Larger fleets engaged enemy concentrations, always attacking where the hierarchy was weak, withdrawing before superior forces could respond. It was exhausting to watch. I could not imagine how exhausting it must have been to execute. But the results were undeniable. The hierarchy's advance stopped. Then it reversed. World after world that we had given up for lost was liberated, its surviving populations evacuated before the hierarchy could regroup. The tide of red on the strategic maps began to recede.
And then the humans unveiled their true plan.
Operation Prometheus, Admiral Okonkwo called it, briefing us in the command center of his flagship. A single, coordinated strike at the heart of the hierarchy's power. The holographic display showed the void reaches, that impossible target we had dismissed as unreachable. "We've spent the last 6 months mapping the hierarchy's defensive network," the Admiral continued. "Their production centers, their command nodes, the infrastructure that allows them to replace losses faster than we can inflict them, and we've identified a weakness." "What weakness?" Fleet Admiral Sorenthas demanded. He had grown more respectful of the humans over the months, but old habits died hard. "They're centralized. For all their distributed command structures, their entire industrial capacity depends on a single processing core, a massive artificial intelligence that coordinates all their production. Destroy it, and their entire logistics network collapses. They won't be able to build new ships. They won't be able to repair damaged ones. They'll be frozen, unable to respond while we systematically dismantle everything they've built." "And how do you propose to reach this core? The void reaches are 4,000 light-years away, through the densest concentration of hierarchy forces in the galaxy." Admiral Okonkwo smiled. "We don't go through them. We go around and above and below, all at once." The display shifted, showing multiple vectors of approach. Fleet movements that would have been impossible for the Ascendancy's rigid command structure, but were perfectly suited to humanity's decentralized coordination. "We've been building something," the Admiral said. "Something we didn't tell you about, because we needed to be sure it would work. We call it the Needle." The hologram showed a vessel unlike anything I had ever seen. It was small, barely the size of a cruiser, but it pulsed with energies that made the void lances look like children's toys.
The needle is designed for one purpose: to deliver a payload directly into the hierarchy's core, a payload that will destroy not just the processing core, but the fabric of space around it. The void reaches will become a wound in reality, impassable, uninhabitable, and permanent.
You would destroy an entire region of space? I asked, horrified.
Yes, that is monstrous.
Yes, Admiral Okonkwo agreed. It is, but so is extinction, and those are the only two options left. The room was silent. I looked at the faces of the human officers, tired, determined, and utterly without doubt. They knew what they were proposing, they knew the cost, and they were prepared to pay it.
The needle requires a pilot, Commander Chen said quietly. Someone to guide it through the hierarchy's defenses and trigger the payload manually. The energies involved make remote detonation impossible.
A suicide mission, Sorrenthes said.
Yes. And you have volunteers?
Commander Chen's expression did not change. We have 12,000 volunteers. We had to turn most of them away.
I stared at her. 12,000 beings willing to die for a chance, not a certainty, but a chance to end the war. 12,000 humans who had raised their hands and said, yes, I will fly into the heart of darkness and never return.
Why? I asked. Why would so many of your people choose to die?
Admiral Okonkwo turned to me. Because they're human, Arbiter. Because we've been doing this for a very long time. Every generation there are those who are willing to give everything, their futures, their lives, their very existence, so that others might survive. It's not noble, it's not glorious, it's simply who we are.
He looked back at the hologram of the needle.
We are a species that crawled out of the mud and dared to reach for the stars. We've been told we couldn't. We've been told we shouldn't. We've been told we were too weak, too primitive, too insignificant. And every time we've proven them wrong. Not because we're better, but because we refuse to give up.
He met my eyes.
They thought our defiance was a bluff. They thought we would fold when faced with real power. They thought we were playing a game we didn't understand. But we weren't bluffing. We never bluff. We just wait for the right moment to show you what we're really made of.
Operation Prometheus launched on the 289th day of the Alliance. 300,000 ships, the combined might of humanity and what remained of the Ascendancy, attacked on 17 different fronts simultaneously. The hierarchy responded exactly as the humans had predicted, pulling forces from across their territory to meet the threat, stretching their defenses thin.
And through the gaps, moving faster than anything I had ever seen, the needle slipped into the darkness of the void reaches.
I watched from the command center as reports flooded in from across the galaxy. Human and Ascendancy ships dying by the thousands, holding the line, buying time for a single small vessel to reach its destination. The cost was staggering. Every minute that passed meant more lives lost, more ships destroyed, more futures extinguished.
But the humans did not waver. They did not break. They died at their posts, sending final transmissions of defiance, fighting until their reactors failed and their life support collapsed and their weapons ran dry.
And still they held.
The needle reached the hierarchy's core 3 hours into the battle. Its pilot, a young woman named Lieutenant Elena Vasquez, who had celebrated her 28th birthday 2 days before, sent a final transmission that was broadcast to every ship in the fleet.
This is Needle Actual. I'm in position. Tell my family I love them. Tell the galaxy we were here.
A pause. For Earth. For humanity.
for everyone.
And then the void reaches ceased to exist.
The explosion, if it could be called that, was visible across half the galaxy. A wound in space, exactly as Admiral Okonkwo had described, that swallowed everything within 1,000 light-years. The hierarchy's core, their production centers, their command infrastructure, millions of their ships caught in the cataclysm.
All of it gone.
The hierarchy's remaining forces, suddenly cut off from central command, unable to receive orders or coordinate their movements, fell into chaos. Some continued to fight, following their last directives. Others attempted to retreat to territory that no longer existed. Still others simply stopped, their programming unable to cope with the absence of the network that had guided them.
The combined fleet fell upon them like wolves upon scattered sheep.
The final phase of the war lasted 4 months. 4 months of hunting down every remaining hierarchy vessel, destroying every automated factory, scouring every world they had touched. Humanity did not offer terms of surrender. There were no negotiations, no attempts at peace.
The hierarchy had declared a war of extinction. Humanity finished it.
I was present when the last hierarchy ship was destroyed. It was a small vessel, barely the size of a shuttle fleeing through an unnamed system on the edge of explored space. A human cruiser intercepted it, disabled its engines, and fired a single kinetic round that reduced it to atoms.
Admiral Okonkwo, standing on his bridge, watched the debris disperse. Then he turned to his communications officer. "Signal all commands. The war is over. The hierarchy is defeated. All ships may stand down."
The bridge was silent for a moment. Then, softly at first, the crew began to weep. Hardened warriors, men and women who had seen friends die and worlds burn, wept like children. The tension that had held them together through months of impossible struggle finally released, and they were left with nothing but the weight of what they had endured.
Admiral Okonkwo wept too. I saw the tears on his dark cheeks, and I understood that his calm throughout the war had not been the absence of feeling, but its perfect containment. "How do you feel?" I asked him later, when the celebrations had died down and we sat together in his private quarters. He was quiet for a long moment. "Empty," he said finally. "Relief, grief, pride, horror at what we had to do, gratitude that it's over. All of it at once, and none of it enough." "Your species saved us," I said. "Saved the ascendancy, saved the galaxy. You should feel triumph." "Perhaps, but all I can think about is the cost." He looked at me. 47 million humans died in this war, Arbiter. 47 million of my people who will never go home, never see their families, never grow old. And Lieutenant Vasquez, who flew into the heart of darkness and pressed the button that saved us all. She will be remembered forever. Will she? In 1,000 years, will anyone remember her name? Or will she just be a footnote in a history that moves on to the next crisis, the next war, the next hero who has to give everything so that everyone else can keep living? I had no answer. "That's the truth about humanity," Admiral Okonkwo said. "We're not special because we're better or stronger or smarter than everyone else. We're special because we keep going. Because no matter how many times we get knocked down, we get back up. Because when someone tells us it's impossible, we find a way anyway." He stood, walking to his window, looking out at the stars.
The hierarchy thought they understood war. They thought they could calculate victory through resources and logistics and numerical superiority. But war isn't just mathematics. It's will. And human will is strange. We can convince ourselves of anything. We can endure anything. We can sacrifice anything if we believe the cause is just.
He turned back to me. They thought our defiance was a bluff. They thought we were posturing, making threats we couldn't back up. They looked at our small fleet, our young civilization, our primitive technology, and they saw weakness. But they were wrong. They saw what we wanted them to see, and when they finally understood the truth, it was too late.
The truth?
That we weren't bluffing. That we never bluff. That when a human says they will fight to the last, they mean exactly that. No exceptions, no surrender, no retreat.
He smiled, and there was something terrible in it.
We are the species that sent our young men into machine guns because we believed in a better world. We are the species that walked into gas chambers singing hymns of defiance. We are the species that flew planes into enemy ships rather than let them threaten our homes. We are the species that built bombs capable of ending civilization and used them because we believed the alternative was worse.
"You are monsters," I whispered, not meaning it as an insult.
Yes, he agreed. We are. But we are also the species that rebuilt after every war, that created art and music and literature to celebrate the beauty we almost destroyed, that looked at the stars and decided to reach for them, not because it was easy, but because it was hard. We are capable of terrible things, Arbiter, but we are also capable of wonderful ones. The challenge is making sure we choose the right moments for each. 6 months after the war ended, I returned to what remained of the collective ascendancy. Our civilization would never be what it was. Too much had been lost, too many worlds destroyed, too many lives extinguished. But we would survive, we would rebuild, and we would never again make the mistake of underestimating the quiet species on the edge of the galaxy.
The humans, for their part, did not claim dominion over the territories they had liberated. They asked for nothing but friendship and fair trade. They helped us rebuild our shattered infrastructure, sent engineers and doctors and teachers to worlds that had lost everything. They did not gloat. They did not lecture. They simply helped, as if saving our civilization had been nothing more than the decent thing to do. I think that frightened me more than anything else. On my last day on Europa Station, before I boarded the ship that would take me home, Commander Chen found me standing at a viewport, watching the stars.
"You're thinking," she said. "I am always thinking. It is a failing of my species."
She laughed softly. "What are you thinking about?"
I considered the question. I am thinking about a conversation I had with Admiral Okonkwo, about human nature, about the strange combination of destruction and creation that defines your species. And I am thinking that the galaxy has changed, not just because of the war, but because of you. For 11,000 years, the Ascendancy believed we understood the universe. We had mapped its powers, catalogued its dangers, understood the rules by which civilizations rose and fell. And then you appeared, and nothing we knew was true anymore.
"We're not that different from anyone else," Commander Chen said. "We just don't give up easily."
That is precisely what makes you different. I turned to face her. The hierarchy was ancient. They had existed for millions of years, perfecting their strategies, refining their technologies, conquering countless species.
And you destroyed them in less than a year. Not because you were more advanced, not because you were more numerous, but because you refused to accept that victory was impossible.
She shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. We just did what we had to do.
Yes, and that is the most terrifying thing about you.
I looked back at the stars. When I return home, the High Council will ask me what I have learned. They will want to know if humanity is a threat to the ascendancy, if we should fear you, if we should take steps to contain your expansion before you grow too powerful.
And what will you tell them?
I was silent for a long moment.
I will tell them the truth, that humanity is not a threat to us, as long as we give them no reason to be. That you are the most dangerous species I have ever encountered, precisely because you do not seem dangerous. That you smile and help and build and create every turn.
I met her eyes. I will tell them that the greatest wisdom I have learned from humans is this: never mistake kindness for weakness. Never assume that those who build cannot also destroy. And never, ever call a human's bluff.
Commander Chen smiled. Because we don't bluff.
Because you don't bluff. The ship that carried me home passed through the region where the void reaches had once existed. There was nothing there now, only a vast emptiness, a scar in the fabric of reality that would remain for eons. A monument, in its way, to human determination, a reminder to the universe of what happens when you push a species to the edge and expect them to fall.
They don't fall, they push back, and the universe learns, too late, that it should have been paying attention all along.
I thought about Lieutenant Elena Vasquez, the young woman who had piloted the needle into that darkness. She had been 28 years old, barely an adult by ascendancy standards. She had never seen the great wonders of the galaxy, never known the pleasures of a long life, never had the chance to become anything more than what she was in that final moment. But in that moment, she had been everything. She had been humanity itself, distilled into a single act of defiant sacrifice. She had looked into the heart of annihilation and said no. Not today, not ever, not while I still draw breath.
And the universe had listened.
The stars outside my window burned in their eternal silence, indifferent as always to the struggles of the civilizations that lived beneath them. They had witnessed the rise and fall of empires beyond counting. They would witness countless more. In the grand scale of cosmic time, the war against the hierarchy was nothing, a brief flicker, a momentary disturbance in the vast unfolding of eternity. But to those who lived through it, it was everything. It was the moment when the universe changed, when the old order crumbled, when a species that had been dismissed as irrelevant revealed itself to be something far more than anyone had imagined. I closed my eyes and let the hum of the ship carry me toward home. And in the darkness behind my eyelids, I saw them, the humans, not as conquerors or destroyers, but as what they truly were, survivors. A species that had clawed its way up from nothing, endured every hardship, overcome every obstacle, and emerged into the cosmos with a simple, terrible message for anyone who would threaten them. We are still here. We will always be here. And if you come for us, you had better be prepared for a fight that will cost you everything.
Because we don't bluff.
We never bluff.
And that was not a threat. It was a promise,